name is Maggie, and I am one of the pastors here at Mercy Street, and that was my husband Tim celebrating, and I said we have been in a crazy month of all the activities. So softball, women's event, and then my son's play thing. So we are in the fullness of life, but it's also so many blessings. And so I'm so grateful to just watch my family kind of flourish in their little lanes. And so it's good to be with you guys. And I just also, we always did a shout out, and I just want to recognize our very own Bob might be joining us online right now. And so we love you, Bob, so much, and we are lifting you up in prayers, and just know that you are with us, and so we are with you. We are going to get started into our last week of this series that we have been doing, Fully Alive, as we've been kind of talking about what that means with after the resurrection, and how Jesus has been kind of giving us an opportunity to live differently. And so we're actually going to go back to one of his teachings before that, and I'm going to have Joe come and read our scripture for us tonight.
John 10, verses 1 through 10. Very truly, I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly.
Amen. Thank you, Joe. I love Facebook memories because they always do a little flashback. And this photo popped up on my memories, which is from 2011 when I joined Mercy Street. You can see the great quality of phones back then. And I was terrified to go up. And the only reason I agreed to go up was because Lana was willing, like, you come up with us. And I was like, okay, I will come up with you and I will stand up there. And so honestly, I almost got very emotional with AZ, wherever I think she went with the, oh, there you are. When you just shared you were here for a year, because I look back at where I was 15 years. And in 1 year, you're already sharing your story at Santa Maria. So good on you. But I look back at that, and I didn't even have a year sober, and I was still so terrified. I knew this was a good place, obviously, because I said, yes, I want to be with you guys. But I was still so scared of who I was, still scared of what the commitment of being in the church was. You know, I would be what some theologians or ministry leaders, when they call nuns and duns. Have you heard of these phrases? Yeah, a nun is someone with no religious affiliation, and a dun is someone who may still have faith, but may still believe in God, but is done with the church. And that was me, and I'm your pastor. So something has happened in the midst of these 15 years, but I was done because I had seen so many people hurt by the church. I had seen too many people not seem to fit the mold of what some people had decided that Christianity was supposed to look like. And instead of helping people to live free, it seemed like so many church spaces became places where people were learning to just hide. Hide their questions, their confusion, their shame, or hide the parts of themselves that they were so afraid were not socially acceptable within the church space. It felt like the message was you either believe the right way or you are out, or you live the right way or you are out. You fit the mold or you go find somewhere else to belong. I don't know if you've picked up any of those kind of messaging. So in my young adult years, it seemed like you had two options. You could either kind of conform or you felt like, hey, that mold, that's me. I fit in, and you were a part of the flock. Or you felt like, okay, I got to conform and I got to look the part and kind of sound the part, and then maybe I will feel like I belong. Or you could learn to live on the outside. And that's kind of where I found myself. Today, maybe that feels a little less devastating to some people because there are so many places that we try to create belonging and community. Neighborhoods, jobs, schools, kids' sports team. I mean, we have a great picture of all of us that have been hanging out through this softball league. It's a good group of families. But maybe you're in a running club or a pickleball club or online forum where you share interests with common people, gaming communities. I know we got some gamers in the house. You have shared hobbies in all kinds of spaces. That was Greg, I know it was. But all sorts of places that people are finding connection because we are wired for connection. Throughout human history, we see that people flourish in community. We were not created to live disconnected from God and one another. So for a long time, when I heard the text that Joe read for us, and Jesus says, I am the gate, I heard it from a lens of exclusion. I heard it almost like Jesus was the bouncer at the door, and he was going to check your ID, see if your fit was exactly what it needed to be to go into the club. And that's just how I understood this like religious holy club. I just didn't feel like maybe I put the mask on, if I wore the Sunday best, that I could come in and somehow my insides wouldn't feel so displaced within the church. And when we hear the passage the way I am the gate, it can sound like another barrier, another religious test, another way to divide the insiders from the outsiders. But when we read John 10 in context, meaning inside the gospel with the other chapters it's attached to, when we pay attention to that, we see in John 9, Jesus is doing something completely different. Jesus is not reinforcing the barriers to keep wounded people out. Jesus is actually confronting religious folks who thought that they were the bouncers for the religious elite. That keeps the wounded from finding a sense of belonging within the community. Jesus was revealing himself as the gate into abundant life with God. Not a gate that exists to exclude, but a gate that opens into the pasture, into safety, into freedom and care and a sense of belonging. The verses we read in 10 do not exist on their own. In our Bibles, it starts on a new chapter, but the story is actually directly linked from what came before. You see, Jesus does not just randomly start talking about sheep and shepherds and thieves and robbers and gates and pastures. This imagery is connected to what Jesus had just seen on display with the religious community. In John 9, Jesus heals a man who had been blind from birth. And I encourage you, if you want to dig deeper, spend some time. We won't have time. It's a pretty long chapter. I'm going to sum it up for you guys. But this man had lived his whole life blind, which means in that time he was living at the mercy of the community and strangers who might be able to provide or care for him. He would have been dependent on that charity, and his life would have been dependent, again, on the judgments of the community, on what his blindness meant for him and his family. And at the beginning of John 9, even the disciples look at him and ask Jesus, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind. You see, before the man is healed, before his story is known, before anyone asks him his name, he is turned into a theological debate. Who sinned? Whose fault is this? What category should we put him in? And I get it, we're logical people. We want to categorize, it makes things simple, it helps us understand where things go. But Jesus refuses this premise. Jesus says this blind man is not a punishment for sin, and then Jesus heals him with mud in his eyes. Jesus gives him sight. And you would think that the community that's watching this miracle take place would rejoice just like we did in our celebration time, but they did not. You would think they would say, the man who was pushed aside in the margin has finally been healed. This man who we once used to talk about, poor blind man, right, is now standing before us, healed. His story is a testimony to God's goodness. But that is also not what happened. Instead, they questioned him. They questioned his parents, and they questioned if he was actually really blind since birth. The question was if the healing was even legitimate, if it was coming from Jesus. The question whether Jesus could really be God. They are committed to protecting these categories that makes the religious life make sense instead of rejoicing the miracle that is right in front of their eyes. This man is not only given sight, but when you are in that place, you aren't a part of the community. And so he was asking to be seen. He was asking to come back into the fold with the community. But the religious leaders refused him mercy. The barrier to belonging remained. And by the end of John 9, they run him out and they want nothing to do with Jesus. And again, this desire to kill Jesus was just ramping up with the religious leaders. Jesus treated this man with love and compassion. And then Jesus begins talking about shepherds and sheep, and this is where Joe brought us today. Very truly I tell you, which is this connecting words to what that story about. Anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in another way is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. And then Jesus begins to say that the shepherd calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. That the shepherd follow because they will know his voice. They will not follow the voice of a stranger. Now, if we were to disconnect John 10 from John 9, then we may assume that Jesus is simply making a simple statement about salvation through him. But if we keep the story together, we begin to see that there is a critique that Jesus is saying. Jesus is speaking after the aftermath of what those religious leaders just did to keep somebody out from the community. So when Jesus talks about thieves and robbers, he's naming the danger of religious leadership that harms the flock while claiming to protect it. He is naming the kind of religious systems that will steal joy, that kill belonging, and destroys people's sense of grasping the basic of God's love is for them. Because that just had happened, a man had been healed and given sight and testified to the mercy of God, and the religious leaders could not celebrate it. Even the man's own parents, the blind man's parents, are a part of this whole situation. They were afraid to speak out because the text tells us they were afraid of the religious leaders. They were afraid to say if they were to say what Jesus had just done, that harm would come to them. So they even back out, their own son. And they say, he is of age, why don't you ask him what just happened? You see, fear had a way of grasping the community from the authority that was speaking over this group. And Jesus said, this is not shepherding. This is not care. This is not the voice of God.
because a true shepherd does not use the sheep. A true shepherd, as the text we just read says, knows the sheep, calls them by name, will lead them, will go ahead of them, and does not steal life, but gives life. Jesus says, I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. This is not bouncer language, right? This is a language of care, of protection. Jesus is the gate that opens the pasture into safety, into freedom, into a life that is connected with God. And I will say, the more I read this, and when you see again, it's a critique of religious community. It is not just about a life that is personal, about how my life is, but it's also the communal life for everyone. Because sheep are not solitary. We see it talks about the flock. They are known individually by the shepherd. They are called by name, but they are gathered into this shared life. We live in a culture that often hears abundant life, right? And immediately we think of our own personal gain, our personal abundance, more money, more success, more comfort, more opportunities or influence or ease. And listen, I would love a lot of those things. I would love a lot more energy. I would love a lot more money. I would love a lot more concerts to go to and enjoy slow mornings and abundance of finished laundry rather than the opposite. But when Jesus says, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly, he is not talking about a life where I simply get what I want. He is not talking about our personal excess. He is talking about a life that is connected to God, a life that is marked by being known, called, led, set free, protected, and nourished. A life where the wounded are not left outside. Where healing is not only noticed, but it is celebrated in front of the community, lifted up by the community. When those who are isolated are gathered in and seen. That the vulnerable would be protected. Life where the whole flock is cared for. Abundant life is not having more than everyone else. Abundant life is being connected to the divine source, the giver of life. And when we are connected to this source of life, we begin to care about what brings life to others. Many of us know what it's like to, live life for our own selves, to make sure our needs are met. And some of us have been somewhat successful on that. Others have found, the bitter ends to where that journey can take you if you have a distorted understanding of getting your needs met. This is where John 10 helps us to discern between God's will and our will. Because our will often will ask, what will give me more? How do I protect what is mine? How do I stay comfortable? How do I keep control? And God's will, what leads to life? Who is still outside of the fold? Where is healing still needed? And how do I follow the voice of the shepherd? I think this is especially important for us in the church. That Jesus in John 10 is comforting, right? He is offering life. He is the good shepherd. Jesus came to care for his people, right? But Jesus is also shown as the embodiment of God's grace and action in the world. But it is also connected to that critique. A critique of any religious community that claims to represent God while making people hide in shame. It is a critique on any leadership that is more interested in control and power than the care of those they are meant to protect and serve. It is a critique on any theology, our thoughts about God, that turns wounded people into problems instead of neighbors, a sense of kinship, a sense of belonging to one another. And so this is an invitation for us today to continue to lead into a different kind of community, a community that is shaped by listening to the shepherd's voice. And when I say shepherd, I mean God. I do not mean the small role that Amanda and I play as pastoring and shepherding this community. We are on the same ground, connected to the same source. Together, we will listen and discern God's will as we walk it out together. But at our best, Mercy Street is a place where your questions are welcome and not seen as threats to leadership or to anybody in the community. Where belonging is not reserved for the people who have already figured out how to fit in. We welcome you to be as weird as you'd like to be. Where people don't have to hide the tender, unraveled places of their lives. They can come in the midst of it. And just when we might be tempted to think that Jesus is only taking care of the insiders, later on in John 10, Jesus keeps going and he says, I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold, and I must bring them also. And they will listen to my voice. In other words, that the shepherd's care is bigger than any boundary that people want to draw. The flock is not ours to define by what makes us comfortable. The flock belongs to God. And in my short experience, the shepherd is always calling, always gathering, always leading, always making room for more life than we could imagine is possible. So maybe one of the questions that we can take away from John 10 is, whose voice have you been listening to lately? Are you listening to the good shepherd's voice? Because the voice of the shepherd does sound like truth, yes, but that truth should lead to life. Is life springing up within you? Not just your own life, but life and flourishing for all. So sometimes that's going to comfort us, and sometimes it is going to challenge us if the flourishing is just for myself and not those around me. And when we learn to recognize that voice of the good shepherd, we begin to notice the other voices for what they are. Voices that tell us we're not enough, that someone else does not belong, that there is not enough room, that we're only safe if we build a higher fence. Jesus says, I am the gate, and through him the sheep come in and go out, and they find safety in the pasture. There is room and care and life, abundant life. But it is not an abundance of having more for ourselves. Richard Rohr talks about abundance as the opposite of scarcity. Scarcity makes us guard or compete or measure and withhold, but the abundance of God frees us to let grace move through us. Jesus does not come so we can hoard this abundant life for ourselves. Jesus comes to connect us to the very source of life, and that we can become people who allow that life to flow through us. So when I think back to the girl that 15 years ago came and stood in front of this community, the one who was done with church, I do not think she needed to hear a better argument for church. I do not think she needed someone to hand her a list of reasons that she should just get over it. I think she just needed to encounter the voice of a good shepherd. A voice that says, I know you. You're not a problem. You do not have to hide. And you don't have to earn your place in my love. Follow me, and I will give you life. And I stand here full of gratitude because that is thankfully what I heard. That is what I heard and I saw reflected in this room from the interactions with the people who have experienced that goodness, who have experienced grace and connection and not shame when they say too much or they blurt out all the dirty secrets or they share the anger that they've been holding within, but it was just greeted with love. Love. Maybe there's some of you here today who need to hear that voice, whether it's for the first time or it feels like it's been a while. Maybe you're still wondering if you could belong, if you were to fully show up in this room as you are. Or maybe you've been inside this fold for a while, and this text is inviting you to really think, who has been pushed out, whether here or around the world? Who has been questioned instead of celebrated? Who has been treated like a problem when Jesus calls them beloved? Because abundant life is about becoming whole. Whole. The whole community is whole. It is shalom. It is remembering that no one is qualified by God for believing the right thing, living the right way, having the right things, living in the right neighborhood, or from the right state or city or country, or fitting in the right mold. What qualifies us is our very being. We are created by God. We are made in the image of God. And we are loved by a good God. Like a good shepherd who cares for their sheep. And that shepherd has come to offer life for all of us. So we can heal, so we can care, so we can join in on that work to labor with God, to care for the whole flock. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus says, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. For us, for them, for the whole flock. Christ is for all and in all. Amen. As the band comes up, I'm going to, instead of pray, we're going to meditate on some words from a very wise theologian and Howard Thurman. He used these words, and I'm kind of shortened it, but I listened to an address that he gave at a graduation, a baccalaureate. And these words that he has about the sound of the genuine fits to me with what can help us to see not as Jesus as a gate to exclude, but as a door to open all and welcome all. So I invite you to take a posture of listening and allowing the Spirit to meet us and speak to us in this space. So if you'd like to close your eyes, and let's listen to these words. The sound of the genuine is flowing through you. Don't be deceived and thrown off by all the noises that are part even of your dreams and your ambitions when you don't hear the sound of the genuine in you. Because that is the only true guide you will ever have. And if you don't have that, you don't have a thing. Cultivate the discipline of listening to the sound of the genuine in yourself. There's something in everybody that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in other people. I must wait and listen for the sound of the genuine in you. I must wait. For if I cannot hear it, then in my schemes of things you are not ever present. So as I live my life, then this is what I am trying to fulfill. That I'm secure because I hear the sound of the genuine in myself. And having learned to listen to that, I can become quiet enough, still enough to hear the sound of the genuine in you. Now, if I hear the sound of the genuine in me, and if you hear the sound of the genuine in you, it is possible for me to go down in my spirit and come up in your spirit, so that when I look at myself through your eyes, having made that pilgrimage, I see in me what you see in me. Then the walls that separate and divide will disappear, and we will become one. Because the sound of the genuine makes the same music. Amen.